Good afternoon. Welcome. Although my name, Rafael Caliz Sanchez, is Spanish and half of my family lives in Spain, I will do the presentation in English. I speak Spanish, but not enough to do a professional presentation of architecture and BIM. Before I start, I want to thank BIMetica for the invitation to have a quick view on architecture and BIM. Final frontier. Now, my former colleagues already explained you a lot about BIM, and BIM it looks like the new holy grail, that we finally in architecture have found the holy grail. Is it? Later on we will see. I will give you a short flight plan of the journey to the final frontier. First I will start with a short introduction of myself, then BIM in 3 minutes, which seems impossible, but I'm gonna try. Then what means BIM for the architect and its role and position in the designing process. Then incorporating BIM as a communication tool. And at last, is it the final frontier, or are we still looking at some developments yet to come? Now I want to emphasize another side of using BIM, because we have already seen that BIM is a tool to guide the entire building process. As already told, my name is Rafael Caliz Sanchez. I work for an office in the Netherlands. It was founded in 1928, and we are a full-service office, which means from the first contact with the client until facility management and everything in between. We design in all kinds of sectors, but we have a long history in hospitals, and later on I will show you a hospital using BIM, because that's very interesting. A house, a simple house in BIM, well, that's not that difficult. But a hospital is something very different, because you do not only have the physical structure to design, but you have to also communicate with your users, not with the client. My clients are the board of directors, but they are not the users of the hospital. Users are the medical specialists, and they determine how your design should look like. We also, to show you, we make very small projects. This is a private house of one of the directors, but up until large projects. This is the hospital in one of the hospitals in The Hague. This is a middle-sized project for us. This is about 100,000 square meters. The project I will show you later on is a project of about 200,000 square meters. But we also make urban plans. This is a development in Russia, a complete new technological city. Now we switched to BIM using Revit in 2011. And we use it, one of the reasons why we use it is that BIM is not just a design tool. BIM is not only a tool to communicate. In fact, BIM is more. BIM is a working method. And later on I will show you what I mean by that. I want to very shortly show you the history, why BIM evolved, because it's actually an evolution. BIM was, you have two different worlds. We have the academic world and we have the commercial world. Now in the academic world, it already started in 1975. There was the first description of a building information model, building description. Elements have information inside that can be extracted. And later on, during from that point on, we saw a development to finally, in 1992, the first time the term building information modeling was used. Now, the building information modeling, the difference between building information modeling and the first building description system was the fact that the building description system were just elements. The building information modeling is all the elements put together and they have relations with each other. Now, in the commercial community, it's very different. And this is also a little bit the history of our office. First of all, we started using computers in the early 80s in the design process. Enormous hardware used for very simple design plans. Later on, we got into object-oriented, object-based computer-aided design, for example, AutoCAD, and then slowly AutoCAD using 3D. We saw one of the the second speaker, we saw an example of how difficult it was to make a 3D model in AutoCAD. And we, in our office, we made computer-aided visualizations. But I can tell you for 1 minute of animation, we needed about 3 weeks modeling in AutoCAD, 1 week visualization in 3D Studio, and then 20 computers during an entire weekend calculating all the images. So it was an enormous amount of work. But it worked. For clients it worked because they see, I mean, we are professionals. We think in 3 dimensions. But most of the clients do not think in 3 dimensions. So we need a tool to communicate what we have in our mind. And then in the 90s, 3D computer-aided design, object-based was born, and there we have BIM. Now, as I already said, BIM is not only using Revit, using Tekla, using Allplan, using Archicad. BIM is a working method. BIM is, in fact, starts with the very first question of the client. From that point on, BIM can be used, and it's, so as you can see, it's integrated in one model. You already said 40 models. We are using about 20 for the hospital. But you integrate not only the physical aspects of a building, but more, because you have to think, and that's where I come later on in the role, we have to think now, at the early start of a BIM model, how to build a BIM model, because if you do it right, the BIM model doesn't stop when the actual building is built. You keep using the building model, your 3D model, for maintenance and facility management. And if you want to incorporate aspects for facility management in your model, you should think about that at the early start, because at the early start, you still have the possibility to change your model. Later on, it will cost you a lot more effort and a lot more euros. But as a matter of fact, because with BIM you create a virtual building up until a certain level of detail, because I don't know if you know the term level of detail 500, which is as built, but I would advise you not to draw in lot 500 because you get enormous models. There is no hardware in the world that can cope with that. So BIM is factually the entire life cycle of a building, from the first design until it's demolished. Why is BIM so important? Well, I'm going to share a little example with you. I'm not proud of that, but I'm still going to do that. And that's the reason why BIM is, well, for 50% the holy grail. What happens, let's forget about BIM for a second and let's go back to the phase where we were still designing in 2 dimensions. Drawing plans in AutoCAD 2 dimensions, facades, sections, details, all in 2 dimensions. But all different archives. Now what happened in, unfortunately, in one of the work we had was that there were some errors between a section and a detailed drawing. Now the contractor built and saw the detail and assumed that that detail had to be used in all parts of the facade, which wasn't. And it was a surgical department, and when they started using it, they had enormous problems with condensation of water on the interior walls. And if something shouldn't happen in a surgical room, it's condensation of water, because it's not hygienic. We examined how it could happen, and we saw that there were changes made in the facade, but the changes were not made in the detail taken, in the detailed drawing. And there you have your problem. As a matter of fact, that, if you work correctly with BIM, should be impossible, because if you change something in the plan, it automatically changes in your section, and it automatically changes also in your facade. Which doesn't mean, in my opinion, that you should rely on the software. Always make a check if everything went well. Now, of course, during construction, it's a perfect tool, because we can, in advance, see where we have possible collisions. The margin of error and miscommunications is very, very small, and false interpretation is almost impossible. Almost. And of course, during the actual building process, we have less problems. Let's suppose we have a floor, and in that floor I will have to make a hole because of an air shaft. Now, if I do it in a building, in my design process, it wouldn't take me a lot of time. Even when it's already close to putting it on the market, we see that, well, no, it will cost me about 5 minutes. I mean, with our price, it would be about 20 euros. That's it. Changed. Okay. Now, suppose the floor is already built, actually built, and then they discover, ooh, we made an error, we have to make a hole here, which was not planned. I can assure you it will cost several thousands of euros. So there's your difference. Changes can be made during the actual building process, but are far more expensive than the changes in the design process. So reduction of failure costs. And with this graph, I would like to show you what it means, where the influence of changes should take place in the design process, not in the building process. Because the red line, that's the line of the costs in time when you make changes. So there you have it. At the end, when you are building the building, your design, if you make changes at that point, it will cost you gold. And of course, connecting your BIM data that you put in a BIM model, use it later on for facility management, because that's the goal of BIM. The goal of BIM is not only to make reduction of failure and then that's it. The goal of BIM is using it until the building is demolished. And that's what we should think about. Now, the architect. Architect comes from Greek, as you probably know, architecton, master builder. And in the past, we were master builders. We were responsible for the entire building process. We had the first contact with the client, and we translated his requirements into a building and coordinated the entire process from the early start until sometimes even demolishing the building. So we make nowadays design concepts. We used to do that, but we make design concepts which have to meet the requirements of a client. But unfortunately, most of the time, there it stops for us. And that is, in my opinion, incorrect. what is also happening, I don't know if it's here in Spain already happening, but the client positions are changing. In the past, for example, in a hospital, a board of directors, they were my clients. Now we have so-called design, build, finance, maintain and operate contracts, which means that the actual hospital is not my client anymore. A group of contractors is my client. They hire me to make a building for them, but their client is the actual hospital. So that changes our role. We are not anymore the first to come in contact with the user of the building. So we have to think about that as well. And when you have a contract like design, build, finance, maintain and operate, I can assure you that you will be obliged to use BIM, because all contractors want that, because they are actually responsible also for the maintenance of the building. And then the coordination responsibility. Who has the coordination responsibility? It's a question I ask you. Anyone idea? Who has the actual coordination responsibility in a BIM process? No one. Well, I myself can give you the answer because I don't know either. But in my opinion, the coordination responsibility should be with the architect. I'll tell you why. Because still we are, as architects, the ones who are the closest to the clients, because we make that design concept. We translate the wishes and the requirements of the client into an actual building using our imagination. Now, that imagination should be transferred into a building, but how do you communicate that with your client or your user? Now, I want to use this work as to show you what I mean about. This is the academic hospital in Maastricht. It's a building of about 200,000 square meters. The building was originally built in 1992. Now, the life cycle of a hospital most of the time is 50 years, but after 25 years, a large renovation most of the time takes place. And here I have a new challenge for you. Creating a BIM model of a building which already is in use, which should stay in use, but at the same time you have to make renovations, large renovations. I will show you later on the renovation of the entire Department of Surgical Operations, about 20,000 square meters. First of all, we made a new building there, and we used, in this case, Revit, but just to make visualizations. This is a nice communication tool for your client. They can actually see in 3 dimensions how the building will be. Now, in this particular case, this is how it's going to be. But we use this also during the designing process to evaluate with the client whether he, especially the wall, the blue wall you see below, we had different types of possibilities for them. A wooden wall, a plastic wall, different colors, and with the visualization of it, the client, user can make better decisions what he would like, which doesn't mean that he determines always how the architecture should be designed, of course. But also interior, and this gives us enormous possibilities. This is one of the configuration rooms in that building, and there we integrated the lighting and everything up until the plans into the designing model, into the BIM model. And this gives the client a very good view of how actually, finally, the design will be. Unfortunately, I can't show you a picture because they are actually building it at this moment. As I already said, the building in the right corner below, that's the new building. The rest of it is existing. and I myself are working now at the renovation of that surgical department. So when this work came to us, and we have a long-term relationship with this hospital. We actually designed the first hospital. They came to us and they said, well, okay, we are now at the beginning of the total renovation of the hospital. So in the next 10 years, the complete hospital will be renovated from inside. And I mean large renovations. So there we said, well, why not then transfer your system from simple 2D design to BIM modeling? Wow, good idea. The only thing we forgot is that we now have to think already, building the BIM model in this stage, what kind of information do you put into that model? Because the hospital wants to use the BIM model later on for maintenance and facility management. So there is, that's a challenge. And second of all, how do you make a BIM model used by the hospital for facility management while I have to use it at the same time because I'm still renovating another part of the hospital? And maybe it looks like if I have a lot of questions, but that's what I also want to show you. We're still not there with BIM. If I compare BIM with the life of a human being, I would say BIM at this moment is in primary school. There are still a lot of questions that are not answered by anyone, not even by Autodesk. So that's why, for example, where is the legal responsibility of the BIM model? Now, if I have, for example, a work which starts at point 0, ends at point 100, it's very simple. I make the model, the responsibility legally is with me, and at the moment the building is built, I transfer the model to the client, and then it's legal for them. But I want to ask you, where is the legal responsibility here? Now I got a little signal, so I'm going a little bit faster because what I want to show you is the future. And that's why this one is double. Just 1 minute, and I'm ready. Final frontier. Well, in my opinion, not. As I already said, we're in primary school. BIM modeling can be used for augmented reality. Augmented reality not only during the building process, but also later on in maintenance. How many times doesn't it happen that they have to look at all kinds of drawings? Where are the installations? Where are exactly my shutters? With augmented reality and a correct BIM model, that's our future. Already experimenting in the United States with that. Communicating with your client, not only with drawings, no. There is software Unity 3D which can transfer your complete BIM model into a game engine, and then you can give that to your client and they can watch their building on a Nintendo, on a Wii console, on an Xbox, you name it. They don't need computers. Combine that with the Oculus Rift visualization glasses, and you actually can invite your client to your office and say, well, you know what, you want to walk through your building? Have a go. And they can actually experience the building, not only from images. And then one of the most important things, and I had the possibility to do this, simulations. Using your BIM model, put your client into a cave, and there they can actually experience this in almost on one-on-one type of scale. And you can communicate with your client and make decisions. And especially in hospital architecture, that is very important, because if, for example, a surgical room is not perfectly equipped, you could have problems, because eventually the workflow of the medical specialist is the most important. We are only servants to make a perfect environment for our users. And that's what I want to conclude. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed it.